Somebody else was using my chair. Yep.
Hello. So we are now live on YouTube, and I want to say hello to everybody that's here in the Zoom room and those that are joining us live on YouTube. I'm Deborah Pascali Bonaro, and for those that don't know me, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a DONA doula trainer, a Lamaze childbirth educator, and yes, director of the award-winning documentary Orgasmic Birth, The Best Kept Secret. And my newest baby is my new book that goes live April 9th, The Ultimate Guide to Sex After Baby, Secrets to Love and Intimacy. So this is a week for me of celebration, of inviting amazing experts and friends that I feel honored to have in my life to join me in sharing their tips and wisdom, as now more than ever, we all need more healing, calm, connection, love, and intimacy. So I hope you'll stay with us, not only today, because I have a special guest I'll introduce in a minute, but all week of our webinars. And on April 9th, if you purchase our book, and we'll be putting a special link up later, and you come back to our website with the code that you bought the Amazon Kindle, we have over $100 worth of free gifts that we're giving you. And for every book purchased, we're donating $2 to parents that are pregnant or parenting and need food on their table. So we hope that this is a give, 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 and we thank you so much for joining us. So today, I am so honored and really over the moon happy to welcome someone I feel blessed to call a friend and an amazing colleague, Dr. Amy Gilliland. Amy and I was thinking back like last night as I was getting ready to welcome her. We've known each other for so many years as we were doulas in the early days of DONA International. So Amy is also a DONA trainer, and she's certified as a sexuality educator, supervisor, and infant mental health expert with specialized training in attachment and interpersonal communication. She's a highly regarded birth doula researcher, one of the first DONA International birth doula trainers, a research associate at UW-Madison Center for Child and Family Wellbeing, and author of the great book, The Heart of the Doula, Essentials for Practice and Life. And she is joining us today to talk about when sex after baby isn't easy. So welcome, Amy. I am just so honored that you're here with us today.
I'm excited to be here too. It's, you know, I added up the years and I realized that I think it's been at least 25 years we've known each other. And we were one of the first people to ever talk to one another about sex and birth back in the late 90s. I remember that. I remember when you were working, you had one of the first doula programs in the nation in New Jersey. And I was so impressed by that you had actually done the work and gotten a program together that employed people. That was, you know, that was just huge. So, and I went into the research because my passion was like, I want to find out why. I want to figure out the why about what is happening inside people's brains that brings about the doula effect. And so I've figured it out. And so that's my baby that I'm birthing this year I'm getting ready to launch some online courses so that everybody can know, and they're going to be available for nurses. They're going to be available for doctors so that doulas can say to their favorite OB, well, you want to know what's happening here? You want to know why I get these great results? It's not just because I know when to do a double hip squeeze. It's because this is what's happening hormonally in the laboring brain, and I'm working with it rather than against it. And so that's, I published The Heart of the Doula about a little over a year ago, and this has been selling really well for me, and it's my research memos. So this is not from me. I wrote it, but it's informed by over 45 different doulas and over 25 different parents who had doula support. Some who hired it, and then some who was provided that in the hospital, and they didn't even know what a doula was when they got there. So all of those doulas have contributed to what they think their best practices are. And so I wrote it in an accessible way. And right now, the ebook is 15% off. If you go to bookbaby.com and you put in the code, I think it's now 15, you can get the ebook for less than $9. And I wanted it to be available globally right now because globally we're all indoors. So that's why I did the ebook rather than the print book, because you can have it right away tonight. And so that's on the store on bookbaby.com where you'd use that code. So now 15.
Yeah,
so,
thank you so much. And I'm glad to know that for all
yeah.
doulas with us, but also so many that we're training right now virtually. And I do have to say, Amy, your research, like I've been a doula a long time. And when you started explaining to me and understanding what that effect was and how it was happening, I mean, you're in every single workshop I ever do. I mention your name. There's not a doula I train that doesn't know your name and your work. So it's made your contribution. Thank you.
Well, it works both ways because everybody in my workshops knows who you are too, because you don't birth any differently than you do sex in your head, because it's the same organs, it's the same ideas, it's the same ability to let go. And that also kind of brings us to our topic today about when sex after baby isn't easy, because part of what contributes to that is what happened to you during your birth and how you were treated and whether your birth was medicalized or not, if you had any psychological or emotional injury, or if you had any physical injury that you need to recover from. All of those things are wrapped up in the postpartum and how people recover. And I realize that we've got people listening to this who are in couple relationships where it's just the two of them, that we've got people who have different kinds of sexual relationships that are more non-traditional. We have single people out there who've given birth and who are wondering, okay, great, when I'm ready, how am I gonna, integrate all of this? So I realize we've got all these different listeners here today. So I'm hoping I can address all of their concerns with what I have to share. So, but the first part is just, I'm really happy in 2020, there seems to be a revolution of awareness about just how difficult postpartum is. And that seems to be a part of Lamaze, is saying, okay, we've been kind of de-emphasizing postpartum. And with the feedback that we're getting from a lot of youngers who are having babies today is like, whoa, I was prepared for the technology at my birth. I was prepared for the way people were going to treat me. I was totally unprepared for postpartum and what my postpartum body was going to be like, and how my emotions were going to change almost hourly, and how I couldn't count on feeling like myself at any time in the future. And that kind of uncertainty is part and parcel of postpartum, because it's what's happening in the recovering body. It's taking care of the child. And if you're also feeding the child with your body, there's all of that whole hormonal shift and change that's taking place too. And it doesn't happen like overnight. It's processes that take time. And because of all this, there's this unevenness to postpartum. And there's this, well, I don't know what I'm going to feel like on Friday night. It's like we might be able to get a sitter to get away for 2 hours because we have to pre-plan that. But that might be 2 hours when I don't want to be away from the baby, or we're having feeding issues and now it's finally working out. And so because of that inability to plan, is people think, oh, well, then we'll just have sex spontaneously. It's like, no, because you have to both be in the right place. I mean, if that happens for you, that's great. But I think the first thing we have to acknowledge right away is just the challenge of being a postpartum family, and the postpartum body, and the inability to predict life. That is a huge stressor.
Huge stressor. And I love how you say that people aren't prepared for that. I mean, but I have to say, even years ago, I wasn't prepared for that at all. Like, that was a big shock to me, right? Mm-hmm. And so what are some of the ways people could prepare?
I think first is awareness that you're going to feel a lot of emotions and they aren't necessarily yours. I say that some of them belong to your hormones. Some of them belong to other people who are passing through your life who said something, and it's like, well, that's not really mine. So it's kind of like realizing the core of who you are as a person is still the same. And if you're basically a pretty calm, you know, even person, or if you're an anxious stress bunny, that core of you is still going to be the same, but there'll be times when you'll have experiences that are the total opposite of that. Just because your hormones are changing, and because you're sleep deprived, and because you're trying to take care of somebody who you don't know real well yet. And the challenge of trying to communicate with your child and read their communication and figure out what they need is a whole big, huge task when you're rested.
Yes.
So the one thing I want to say is awareness. And then you have to really, I think if you're having the child as a part of a team or as a part of a couple, that your sexual partners also are part of that team of support, is that we're approaching our sex life as a team. Okay. And that it's not just me and you, and I'm trying to please you and you're trying to please me, and we're trying to second guess each other and do this little dance here. It's like, no, we need to be a team. And that means communicating. You know, it's like, I thought I was going to want to do this tonight, but now it turns out that I really don't. And well, I'm really upset about that because I was really looking forward to this. I can totally make room for you to have your feelings, you know, and to just kind of realize that it's going to be awkward and it's going to be challenging, and yet we're both in it together. And we decide, you know, we said yes to the pregnancy together, and this is just a part of following through on that yes, is just to acknowledge the difficulty, the challenge, and yet we're not alone in that challenge. I think that those, when I talk to people who've successfully traversed this territory, I think the communication, the acceptance of one another is changes and feelings, and that all those feelings are valid, and that it's okay to like be disappointed or frustrated or whatever because of the way things are. And that you have a sense of team. You know, we're doing this together, and yeah, this is really hard. But I think those are the three things that fundamentals that I would say that really help people, no matter whatever else we're going to talk about today. Those would be the basics.
Yeah, I totally agree. I often say, right, sex begins between our ears. It's communication. And you know, shared that so brilliantly. And
Mhm.
I know another area that you speak so well to in your expertise is that people sometimes come out of birth with kind of sexual trauma, or are moving into that postpartum period with that. What are some of your words? What does that look like? And what can we do to both prevent it and to heal it?
Well, I think sometimes it's the difficulty when the body is medicalized. If you're in a couple that that your sex life is exclusive, okay, between the two of you, or even if it's not exclusive, there is a certain amount of territory, physical body territory, that's yours. You know, this is the way we experience our genitals. We share our genitals with one another. And then when you get into a hospital birth situation, and those genitals are medicalized, such as having multiple people doing cervical checks, the putting on of the hospital gown, if there's any tubes and wires going in and out of the vagina for an internal monitor. Sometimes it's just the outward, you know, external monitor, and the gown, and the whole, like the way the person is treated as if they could be anybody, that sense of objectification. Or for the partner, it can be difficult then if they're treating my wife, they're calling her honey and dear, and not acknowledging her as a person. And so those things are all can be triggering for men. And then when they reapproach the sexual situation later, and there is her body, they're like, oh, I remember the last time I saw your vagina. And they flash on that picture with the tubes and wires and the swelling and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, there goes my erection. And how do I reconcile what I experienced? And sometimes it's like, I always want to say, you need to work that out with your partner, because they need to understand that. But sometimes for men, that feels really, really unsafe. Otherwise, they'd be doing it already. So one of the things I'm really encouraging men to do is they really need to talk with other men about what their experience of birth was like, because almost universally, the experience is negative, overwhelmingly negative. And it shows up in men's sexual lives or in their mental health with being depressed. And the reason why is because they don't have anybody to talk to about it. And they really need to talk to one another, their brothers, their cousins, the other men that they kind of vibed with if they took a birth class, is like, when I saw this, that really affected me. How did you work through it? And not assuming that they didn't. What was, did that happen to you? It's like, you don't ask a yes, no question. It's like, how did you work through that? And that's what I'm really encouraging men to do is they need to get that sense of like, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in having this experience. And I'm not alone in having it show up sexually. And if there was an episiotomy, if there was a tear and a repair, if there was a pudendal nerve injury, if there were forceps used, if there was a vacuum extractor used, what the research tells us is that even if men aren't there to see it, it affects their sexual pleasure, their ability to get an orgasm, and their rate of sexual connection with their partner over a year later.
Wow.
Yes, even if they weren't there to see it, because that's what their partner went through. And this is from an Iranian study. So it wasn't done here in the US, but it's very methodologically tight. The statistics are very, very well done, and the comparison groups are really well done. And so what we can conclude from that is that in that culture, and I don't think men are that different from culture to culture when we're thinking about, they're all married, but it's like, did my wife have an emergency cesarean? Did she have a scheduled cesarean? Did she have a spontaneous vaginal birth? Did she have a forceps or vacuum used? Or was there any third degree tear or second, third, or fourth degree tear? All of those things contribute to people waiting longer to initiate sex, feeling less pleasure, feeling more uncertainty, and also less intercourse, because in research, that's really all they look at. They don't care about connection or other experiences of intimacy. They just really want to get genitals next to one another. And it's very frustrating for somebody like me and you too,
yes,
who preaches all different kinds of sex. It's like, well, why is that the only thing you're looking at? That's not the way people experience sex. It's much wider than where we put our genitals in relationship to one another. So, but it's very, very clear that men are very affected by what happens at birth, even if they aren't there. And we have to give them room for that. And I don't think we have. I don't think we've really realized the impact on men. And we've kind of said, well, you should be able to have an erection whenever I want you to have an erection. And that's kind of the way we treat men sexually always. It's like, oh, wait, you don't want to have sex? Wait, that's not right. What, huh? That's like,
what's wrong?
Right. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Because I think we get that as teenage girls. It's like, well, men always want to have sex.
Right.
So, and we think that perpetuates throughout their life course, and it doesn't. There's lots of other things that go along. So I think the medicalization of the body is huge. What our research tells us is when people have experienced a sexual injury, it can take them years. So people who have had a third or fourth degree tear, there is a researcher, her last name is Priddis, Priddis. And I want to do a podcast with this person myself, because they actually experienced that third degree tear and then went on to do the research with other people about that. And I love when the researcher has had an experience and said, okay, now I'm going to go out and do the research on it, because nobody has, because that's what I did.
Right.
And she's in Australia or New Zealand. I'm sorry, I don't remember which country right now, but I don't want to misname it. But that was the finding. She published several different papers in her home country, and then it takes 3 to 4 years. And there's the physical healing, there's the nerve damage healing, which can take a year or two. And the nerves also have to relearn pleasure. They have to relearn pleasure, and that takes time. And then there's also the guilt about, I can't provide intercourse to my partner anymore, and the strain that creates in the relationship, especially if that was an important point of pleasure. for that particular couple. And yeah, so it's a huge psychological journey, and they need a lot of support. They need support from their female friends in regular life. They need specific support from professionals such as a pelvic floor physical therapist and a psychologist or a sex therapist who can help them to still have a fulfilling relationship while they can't have the kind of sex they would like to have, you know, and still want to preserve their partnership or their marriage. Some people get married for the long term and are like, no matter what happens, we're going to figure this out, and that commitment carries them through. And other people get married for certain terms. Okay, this was the terms that we got married under, and now those terms are no longer available, and so I want to reconsider my commitment. And neither one of those things are good or bad, but I just am bringing them up because that's kind of what comes into play for people here when they've gone through this kind of an injury. Will my partner leave me? And so that's why we really, really have to be supportive. And professionals need to understand the psychological damage that goes along with these things, because they don't. OBs and surgeons don't see you again. They don't see you 2 or 3 or 4 years later. And they don't see you every week or every month, so that they reconsider the practices that might lead to these injuries. So, and sometimes it's just an accident. You know, you're planning on a home birth, you got to pushing, the baby's malpositioned, you go to the hospital, they use vacuum successfully, everything works out, and now all of a sudden you've got incontinence and you didn't expect it before, you know. So I kind of went on for a long time there, sorry.
I appreciate that, because no, these are all really, really important, Amy. And it is the things that no one's talking about. And I think that even when we're preparing people for birth, often this is left out of the agenda. And, you know, as educators and doulas all these years, we see those couples that suffer so much postpartum because they haven't thought about this and they don't know where to go. And a lot of times they suffer in silence because they don't realize it's so prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And on the bigger issue, as we are activists in trying to change the system too, we really have to heal this broken system so that everyone can have a healthier, gentler birth, right? That doesn't incur this damage.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say, what are some, you know, resources for someone that's listening right now and saying, wow, that, like, I hadn't thought about that, and that's exactly where we are right now. Like, we're struggling, we had this medicalized birth. What are some tips? You even said to relearn pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I think that some of the best books that I've read, I want to go over and pull them off my shelf right now. I really like Come As You Are is one of my favorites. Do you have that one?
I love it.
Yeah, Emmy, and I happened to meet her at ASEX stuff, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And so I like that. I also like Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity.
Yes.
It's an older book, but it helps you to understand, I think, preserving the mystery. I think in any sexual, my personal experience is that in order to have a certain amount of sexual mystery, there has to be a certain amount of privacy. And there's things that I don't want to know about you, because if I do, they kind of like wear down the mystery. And it's like, for me, that has to do with bodily functions. I don't like to share a bathroom with a sexual partner, because that's just, that doesn't work for me. And for other people, that's not a part of their paradigm at all. And it's like, well, why does that affect you? It's like, I don't know, but we all get to be individuals. But one of the things that Esther Perel says is that when we share daily life and all the minutiae of daily life and living in a household and children and stuff like that, that we forget about the sexual mystique of our partners. So that she re-emphasizes that, and I think that that's like a second year task, postpartum task, is to then turn and share and say, okay, let's start recreating, asking you what you want, asking you what I want. I think in that first year postpartum, there's certain things that are really typical. The touch mismatch, which we've been talking about since I was in Little HA League back in the mid 80s. And that's just hormonal. It's like, if you're the person with the baby all day, then your brain is stimulating oxytocin. So you've got oxytocin, oxytocin, oxytocin. If you're also feeding the baby with your body, then you've also got prolactin going on there. And if the partner is away from home working, what they're doing all day is they're releasing stress hormones, catecholamines, you know, adrenaline, norepinephrine. I have to, you know, negotiate my status. I have to work through conflicts. So when I come home, all I want is to have some yummy oxytocin, and I don't want to have to talk to anybody, because talking is releasing stress hormones. And so there you just have a hormonal mismatch. Just like the person who's been with the baby is like, I've been oxytocined all day long. I don't need any more touch. I don't hear you have the baby. And so often, you know, that's a real classic kind of a hormonal mismatch. It's like, well, how can the person who's been giving stress hormones out all day get their oxytocin needs met for calm and comfort and emotional regulation? And how does the other person get out again into neutral space where I'm not having to produce oxytocin to regulate you emotionally? You know, exercise is great for that. Exercise is a good neutral releasing thing. But most of that is just dealing it with awareness and understanding, you know, really, and understanding how your hormones affect how you interact with other people and what your needs are. Another thing that's real common in that first year is a desire mismatch. And if you're female, biologically female, you're probably a person who it has typically, what people say is that I experience desire, which then leads me to seek arousal. And it's not that way oftentimes during that first year postpartum, is that because of the hormonal shifts and changes, you may not, especially if you're feeding with your body, you may not have those urges of sexual desire. You know, it's like that kind of happened to you, like you're just looking at a pretty landscape or something, you're like, oh, hey, I might want to have sex. That might feel really good. And you're waiting for that. You know, the whole year after you come home from the baby, you're waiting for those moments. I'm just gonna want to do it. It's just gonna happen. And we're just waiting for that. And this is what I say is like, if you're waiting for that, it's like waiting for a butterfly or a hummingbird to land on your shoulder. You know, you may need to be more deliberate. And I like to use the yes, no, maybe system. And that, my partner is interested in maybe some sexual touching and seeing where that goes. Do I feel a yes inside of me? All right, then go. Do I feel a no, then I need to honor my no? Or do I feel a maybe? And what I say is, if you feel a maybe, then say, I'm feeling a maybe. I can't promise you anything, but I'll give it a go for 10, 15, 20 minutes and let's see what happens. So you are negotiating with your partner. And that's what's really clear, is that your partner needs to be able to know that your maybe may turn into a yes, but it also may turn into a no, or I'm complete after making out for 10 minutes. That satisfied me. You know, so your partner also needs to have that flexibility with you. But more often than not, what I find is that if the arousal process begins with whatever kind of touching you like, or caressing, or eye contact, or whatever it is, however you like to get started, is like, see if the arousal doesn't bring on the desire, because more often than not, it will. And it's just to like, do the maybes, go with the maybe, go with the maybe. That would be, yeah.
I love that. What great ways of looking at that. And really to let people know, yeah, in the postpartum year, right? If we're waiting for the hummingbirds, I like that, and the butterflies to land on our shoulder, we're in trouble, right? So, and you did such a beautiful job, Amy. I always love that, because including the hormones into the mismatch, including our arousal levels into the mismatch. There's so much to navigate here. So I know we're kind of coming to the end, and for those that are in Zoom, stay with us because we want to open up your questions. But what would be one last tip for everybody with us and how they could bring together their pleasures and desires that year after baby?
You know, the one thing we haven't talked about is that people are going to need to reassess their sexual agreements, especially around masturbation and the use of sexually explicit materials. Because if there's been certain boundaries around that this may be the year that those are renegotiated. Because what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to have a partner hiding, being deceitful, feeling like they can't be honest about their sexual needs or what they're doing about their sexual needs. Because this is where I see it leading into conflict later, or where you develop this pattern of not being open. And so that's why I say is that even if you haven't talked about it before, if you have a partner that has more desire for orgasm than you do, or you do in being involved with their orgasm, is that you're going to need to renegotiate that, you know, and so both of you get your needs met. And so sometimes the sexually explicit materials thing can open up a can of worms. I want to control that about you. And if that's the case, then where I would send people is to Marty Klein. So Marty Klein has written numerous books, very numerous books, but he writes extensively on his blog about pornography. And he's got a book called His Porn, Her Pain. And I think that his resources around sexually explicit materials and how those work in couples and how our majority culture reinforces certain sexual roles in that, and the influence of shame and guilt and stuff. It's like, I want people to be able to avoid all that. You know, I want you to be able to say, these are my needs. I want to talk to you about that. We're a team right now. How are we going to negotiate that for the next month or two? And then we're going to revisit it. You know, I think that's, no matter what the issue is like having that sense of team with you and your sexual partners around the sexual life that you eventually want to have, and then realizing what's possible now.
Right. Mm-hmm. Great tips. So Amy, I know everybody that's listening is going, how can they get more of you? Where can people find you on social media and your website? Share with us.
I'm in the middle of doing a brand relaunch now. So I'm getting ready to launch my own podcast. I've got, if you're a doula, I have a Dueling the Doula professional group on Facebook. You can certainly join. I have my Facebook page, which you can like, Dueling the Doula, and that will keep you updated on any offers. When I start to open up another multidisciplinary group that's for physicians and nurses and other perinatal professionals and sex professionals, I really want to connect people. And I should be launching a podcast in the next couple of weeks, and we will be talking a lot more about sex and infant mental health, and as well as labor support and birth on that podcast. I really want to expand and get professionals to break down their silos more, and because I think that's really, I can do that. I've been bridging those professions for 20 years now, and I think I can really want to break through that. And we're going to be starting some online courses real soon too, including an introduction to human sexuality for birth professionals. So I'm hoping to launch that. Yeah, that may take 6 more months to get going, but my first class is going to be working with the laboring brain, which was where we started. And so I'm just excited that there's a lot of possibilities coming up, but the best way is Instagram, Amy L. Gilliland, Twitter, Amy L. Gilliland, and as I mentioned, Dueling the Doula. And then I have a newsletter on my website, amygilliland.com, and then you can sign up there for my email list as well. So, and then you won't miss anything.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. This was so many insights. I hope those that are on YouTube, you're leaving us comments, following Amy. And Amy's featured. Her wisdom is in our book, The Ultimate Guide to Sex After Baby. And so I hope you'll be joining us and not only buying a copy on April 9th and getting all our giveaways, but allowing $2 to go and support all those people that are birthing and parenting that really need food on their tables right now. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody, for being with us live. And we hope that you're going to follow our webinars all week. Go to orgasmicbirth.com and you can see all the webinars that are coming up as well.